Across the Aisle segment tonight, President Trump announced this morning that Kim Jong-un's North Korean regime has released 3 American hostages. Take a look.
Right now, flying back are 3 what they were calling hostages. We call them fine people, 3 really fine people. Seem to be healthy. They'll be landing at 2 o'clock in the morning at Andrews Air Force Base. And I'll be there to greet them. Mike will be with me. It will be, I think, a very special time. Nobody thought this was going to happen. And if it did, it would be years or decades, frankly. Nobody thought this was going to happen. And I appreciate Kim Jong-un doing this and allowing them to go. We've picked a time. We've picked a place for the meeting, or summit, as you like to call it. And I think it'll be very successful.
Now, the release of these hostages came during Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's visit to the country, where he and Kim Jong-un also arranged a date and location for President Trump's meeting with the North Korean leader. While we don't yet know what the results of that meeting will be, it's clear that President Trump has effectively de-escalated the conflict with North Korea, at least for now. But will liberals give him credit? With me now, history professor and author of Obama's America, Ian Reifowitz. Ian, good to see you. How you doing?
Fine, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's always good to have you here. All right, Ian, a couple of hours left until these hostages arrive back in the United States. President Trump said they're coming back at 2 a.m. Eastern time. He will be there on the tarmac to meet them. Ian, why were these hostages released?
Well, clearly you have a situation where the North Koreans saw that they could take hostages in order to have a bargaining chip, and then they could give them back when they had when they were able to get something that they wanted. But so that's that's an important question about what are they getting for it and what are we getting for it. But let's of course start by saying it's a great day for America. Anytime American hostages are released, you have 3 people coming back home to safety. They are in good health. That's very important, and President Trump gets credit for that. There's no question about that. But why did they release them now? They released them now because the North Koreans want to advance towards this summit. If they're, you're talking about taking hostages and then giving them back. Well, that in and of itself, other than for the families, is not something that makes America safer or stronger. If the summit goes well, then America might end up being safer or stronger, and then President Trump will get more credit for that as well.
Right. That's a valid point. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with what you said. I mean, it's not a good situation to be bargaining with a country that is holding Americans hostages or that takes hostages in order to get a seat at the bargaining table. That's a really good point. This advance towards the summit that you talk about, is this a good thing in your opinion that we are advancing towards talking to the North Koreans?
I think it is a good thing. I mean, look, negotiations are a good thing. I hope it goes well. More important than anything else to me is that America comes out better off for anything any president does. We only have one president at a time. We want that president to succeed because if he succeeds, we succeed. If he fails, we fail. You can argue about whether or not that's always the attitude people hold. I still remember that a few days after President Obama took office, Rush Limbaugh said he summed up his hopes for the Obama presidency in 4 words: I hope he fails. I don't say that about President Trump. I'm not going to tell you that makes me more of a patriot than Rush Limbaugh. I'll leave that for everybody else to decide. But I hope President Trump succeeds. I want to live in a peaceful world. I want to live in a world where the United States is secure as possible. There's no such thing as 100% security. But that's the point. The president is the one who makes American policy right now. I want him to succeed.
Good for you. Ian, how am I supposed to argue with you when you're being so reasonable? We agree on just about everything that you've said today. It's one of those days. Well, let me ask you, why is it so hard for the left? And you are not included in this group because you gave credit to President Trump where credit was due. His negotiations have secured the release of these hostages, have secured meetings with Kim Jong-un, at least by CIA Director Mike Pompeo, maybe even a meeting between President Trump and the North Korean leader. Why does the left in general have such a hard time giving President Trump credit for the things that are bipartisan that President Trump has done, this being an example? Why can't they separate that from other things that he's done and say, listen, this is a good thing for our country, it's a good thing for these families, and the credit is his?
Well, let's break this down because there are a number of things going on there. One, if we do have a summit meeting with North Korea, that's a positive step, only in that it might lead to something actually positive. It might lead to nothing. So that's fine. I do remember that when President Obama talked about wanting to meet with dictators, he was roundly assailed by the right. I know you talk about the left, so I'll talk about the right. Well, how could you meet with people? So let's make sure, again, we hold people to the same standard on both sides. But again, if we're going to talk about the left, I don't know exactly who you're including. I read a quote today from Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts. He holds John Kerry's seat from liberal Massachusetts. All right, here's what he said about the release of the hostages. He called it, quote, a positive step. And he said, that their return, quote, removes an obstacle to a successful summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. And he went on, quote, their release before the meeting also demonstrates that the combination of pressure and direct engagement is critical for making progress with North Korea, end quote. So whoever the left is, this senator praised Donald Trump and his success in getting these hostages released. So
as he should.
So I think.
And I do want to point out.
You may be exaggerating a bit.
Before we go, I do want to point one thing up. I think the difference. And it's a semi-valid point. I'm not going to argue it too far. It's a semi-valid point to say, well, conservatives said we shouldn't sit down and negotiate with dictators, with tyrants, and now they're praising President Trump when he's doing just that. There's a semi-valid point there. I think the difference is that when President Obama wanted to do that, he wanted to do that without having levied any sanctions, without having basically put himself in the power position. He just wanted to sit down and make friends with people who were clearly untrustworthy. And it might be a different situation here. I don't know whether it is. I don't know whether Kim Jong-un has any intention of giving up his nuclear program, but the fact that President Trump has put these harsh sanctions on and hasn't loosened them at all, even when Kim Jong-un is giving concessions such as these hostages or such as meeting with the South Koreans, that makes it slightly different. But overall, not an invalid point. Ian, we are out of time for today, but thanks for being here.